you can practice, misdirecting people and then, satisfying that same setup with something that's exaggerated. And then you'll get better at it. And then when you get better at it, they start to occur to you naturally the way it does for us organic comics.
Greetings, everyone. Come on in and have a seat up front to the Funny Muscle Podcast. If you're here, then you're looking to learn how to create laughs like a pro. So please help me welcome to the stage your co-host to help you do that, economics professor and open micer Chris Stifler and comedian turned author Mike Lucas.
But the way you like fastly Rolodex through all the heightening devices, and this is what we did last time I talked to you. We threw out all the heightening devices to my plain PDA bit, and we kind of showcased how you take a 20 second idea and make it into a 3-minute bit by anthropomorphizing the seats or the flying birds, or you wrote the scene from a different perspective, or you threw a metaphor at it, or you did a bait and switch, or you tried to do a positive to a negative, or a solution device. And
right.
I think you showed the audience how well your brain for 25 year comic does it. But today, can we go through some of those heightening devices and actually spell out what anthropomorphizing is, or what an extension is, or what let's take some of those heightening devices and just really dive into like 2 or 3.
Yeah, sure. Anyone you want. And that's what I do in the book 2 that I do. What I think is real fun about that book is I go through all 36 humor heightening devices and I apply them to a premise and a setup that I use in the beginning. And I show 36 different ways to heighten it and to answer that how blank is it question. And then what happens is by the end of that, you have a pile of material to choose from. And that's, one of my promises from these books is by the end of it, you'll be able to develop a 5-minute set that you can use to audition for more sets and more work with. And that's how you do that. You apply these heightening devices over and over and over again. And then from that, you look at what you came up with and you see which ones best reflect and show, not tell, your comedy lens. So for me, it would be like, well, some of these are funny, but they don't really reflect the clumsy hole aspect, like sort of the backfiring aspect of my perfectionism, and then some others did, and it made fun of the thing I like to make fun of, and so I choose those, and I don't choose the other ones, and it's the same for you, your economics professor take on these things is going to involve a different view of them. So the ones that you like and one that fit into your act are right. Going to appeal to you, and the other ones, they might be funny, but you might, someone else might use them better than you, and you might not even like them because, and you'll know the feeling when you're about to tell the joke. You'll know the ones that you're excited about telling, and it's usually because those that reflect your lens the clearest, and those get the biggest laughs because people recognize that. They're like, oh, that's this guy, I get it. So let's go through some lenses or some heightening devices, and we can sort of give examples of what those are.
All right, let me see if I can run this. So what I did was I took a Wanda Sykes bit about annoying kids on a plane, and I ran it through your blueprint. And I in front of me is my label here: bit name, premise, setup, norm, violate the norm, and jokes. And I kind of tried to put that bit into that format.
Oh, nice.
So I have like bit name. I call it annoying kid on plane, and there's a lot of setup to it. But basically, Wanda Sykes' comedy lens is she doesn't tolerate BS.
I have her as a divulger of thoughts normally kept private.
Okay,
so same kind of thing, yeah. But that's the thing too. Is funny is we both take a stab at Wanda's comedy lens. They may or may not be what she thinks of as her own comedy lens, and it's what our impression is of based on listening and enjoying her material. So we're not necessarily wrong, but we're also not necessarily right. And we have to keep that in mind whenever we talk about other comics' lenses. You have to always remember you can take a stab at them, but that doesn't mean you got it and nailed it. And that doesn't mean that they would even agree with you. But a lot of comics don't even look at their own lens because it's so organic. They don't want to dissect their frog and ruin it. And you know what I mean? So what we're doing is sort of like a professorial sort of exercise. But anyway, go ahead. So your bit name is Annoying Kids. That's good. And then okay, so the premise though is I like that people think they can come up and talk to me. That's her premise. That's her first premise. That's what she gets people to but sometimes is her setup. And the setup, for her, the normal thing that she's, sometimes I might not be in the mood to hear it, so it might be a good idea for you to check better and listen. Sometimes what you have to say isn't something that's important to me because I'm focusing on my career right then, and I might not receive it that well. So these are like she says, I like that people come up, and then the norm that she's heading towards is all of those, but then the what she says is, but don't. So it's a bait and switch. Instead of a long answer that satisfies the setup that she gave us, it's a quick one. And so it's like we don't expect it. So it doesn't get a big laugh, but that's her first laugh in this bit. And that's the that punchline, don't. And then that is almost a little bit of a recognition laugh of if we already know who Wanda is a little bit, we get why she's like, oh boy, Wanda does not want that. And then we laugh because of a recognition of who she is and what she's like, or must be like, with somebody who's annoying that's coming up to her. So that's how I would, that'd be how I'd break down that first one using the humor blueprint. And I noticed, like, you set the premise. A lot of times I've noticed you'll take a premise and you're thinking of a premise as like a thematic thing. The premise is literally the words that you say. Like, do you say the premise? You announce the premise. Boy, dogs, and I just got a new dog, and I've noticed some things about how puppies eat. That's a premise. And the premise isn't, in colon dogs. The premise is that sentence that I just said. And you need to have that sentence in your act when you begin to start your joke. It gets everybody on board. Now, I like that people feel they can come up and talk to me, says Wanda Sykes. So now we get that this is a bit about her privacy being infringed upon, basically. So she's set us up to understand that she wants to talk for a little while now about her world getting interrupted by us fans, people who have. It's funny, we all have the nerve, like, we think that just because we exist, that she's going to want to talk to us, that she's going to want to hear us repeat our favorite jokes of hers back to her. She's going to want to hear the fact that my cousin likes her. She's going to want to hear the fact that I saw her 3 cities away and that I remember that. and she might want to, but she might not want to, because she might be in the middle of her life. And so it's kind of funny how but that's the premise that she's bringing up, is all those considerations. And now, by just saying that one sentence, I feel like I like that people feel they can come up and talk to me. So there's a bit of sarcasm in that almost, but yet there's a bit of like feigned sincerity. I like that happened. Do you really, Wanda? Do you like that? Because I don't think you do. Because right away she goes, well, don't. So it's fun, right? So then her next premise would be, I was on a plane and this flight attendant walks up and she goes, Miss Sykes, this is Bobby. Bobby is flying by himself today. And that could be right there. That could be the new premise, which is, again, you can say that, well, the old premise is that people come up to talk to me. Now we've got a specific example. So the new premise is saying, I was on a plane. And then the setup is the flight attendant walks up and goes, this is Bobby, and Bobby's flying by himself today. So the normal thing would be, and he saw that he's a fan of yours and he just wanted to say hi. He wanted an autograph. He was nervous, but he wanted to tell you something about his mom loves your act, whatever. So that's sort of not, but it's not. It's Wanda Sykes. She's going to heighten that. So it's again a little bit of a bait and switch. We're going to sit him next to you. Like that's sort of like the implication is, well, don't. We want him to sit next to me. Well, don't is the same thing. And then, well, obviously, and then so her first comment is, well, obviously Bobby's parents don't give a fuck about him, so what do you expect from me? So that's a really funny contrast. He's like, if his parents don't even care enough to show up on this plane and take care of him and conversate with him to keep him busy for this long flight, then why should I have to? And then I'm Wanda Sykes, I don't give a shit about this kid. So that's a funny contrast. What do you expect from me? And then do I look like the air nanny? So now she's created air nanny. Well, instead of a air marshal, she's the air nanny. So she's done a play on words, a recognition laugh. She's done a what's that called? Where you like a TV parody or a name parody TV show, movie, or song. So she's created this fake sort of air nanny. Like, that could be a show, that could be a title, that could be anything, but she's created it. So now through a recognition laugh of air marshal, now it's a frog bank. It's a combination of two worlds. It's air marshal meets I'm now watching this kid and I don't want to. So there's, some sarcasm in it as well. And then her thing is, I don't want to be bothered. I want to sit here and read my book. And that's kind of overstating the obvious. That's she's sort of saying what she shouldn't even have to say. But it probably doesn't get a big laugh. But Bobby wanted to talk the whole fucking flight. So she's, again, it's another contrast. I want to sit here. I want to read my book. Bobby wants to do this. And so there's a contrast there that's funny because we know Wanda. Wanda says shit that most people only keep to themselves, and she's not happy about this situation. And so now she's contrasting what Bobby wants and what she wants. So now she's setting up herself for this whole next thing. I put my iPod on, figuring Bobby get the hint. Bobby kept talking, and tapped me on my shoulder. I was like, "See, this is why you're flying by yourself." So again, that's overstating the obvious. It's an act out. So it's it's kind of cut over to me telling Bobby the truth. And then no one will accompany your little ass. So her whole idea in this bit is there's a reason why this kid's by himself. That like if he was loved and if he was well behaved, he'd have parents with him, kind of a thing. And so that's kind of a bit of a Wanda Sykes thing, because a lot of people send their kids on a flight and they love their kids. It's just they have to do it that way. But in her mind, because of her situation, she was like, those parents, they're making me do their job. So that's what part of where her humor comes from. That's part of her. These are the things we never really say out loud. But if we're on a flight and someone sticks their damn kid next to me, I wish I could say that. Well, now we can, because we remember Wanda Sykes bit on this. Ain't nobody waiting for you on the other end. That's really funny. Now she's actually making up a thing that's scaring this kid, because she's like heightening the idea of, how little do your parents want you? They sent you on this flight, made a stranger babysit you, and now there's going to be no one waiting for you on the other end. That's how much, So it's, and I started thinking, because my favorite show is Lost, I was like, what if this plane goes down? So now she's doing a cut forward to, in a like sort of like a fantasy act out of like maybe a problem solve. She's gonna eat this kid. Like, okay, well, or this is a negative into a positive. Well, because the thing is what if this plane goes down? It's just me and Bobby. I'm gonna eat him, and I'll eat him up. First bite would be the vocal cords, right? To call back to what's bothering her about this kid. He's talking too much. I'm going to bite your cords first. So it's funny, it's clever, and it's also a negative into a positive, right? It wasn't negative. I got this little bratty kid, this chubby kid talking next to me all flight. Now I need food and sustenance because we've crashed. I've got Bobby. He's a perfect meal. So now she's sarcastically turned a negative into a positive. So you can see Wanda Sykes is brilliant. She's using a bunch of different heightening devices, combining them together and creating this whole world now of Lost. And now we've taken that positive that she's created, and now we're going to turn it into a negative, because she's like, dude, we just got stranded 2 minutes ago. Why are you eating a kid? Why are you resorting to cannibalism so quickly? So now it's a funny reverse on what she just did. Now we've taken that positive and turned it back into a negative. Oops. I ate the kid too fast. My bad. So that's a little funny. It's, you can see the fucking IHOP from here. What's your problem? So how awkward is it that I ate this kid too quickly? And well, I can see the IHOP. Why, you have a problem, not him. So yeah, so that's a great bit. That has a lot of different heightening devices in it, and you can see how she combines them together. And the whole time she's using her lens, which is, I'm going to say the stuff that most people would keep to themselves, and you will love me for it. That's a divulging of thoughts normally kept private. You'll love me for it, because we all wish we could be so honest about these struggles, but we can't, because we're polite. We're in society. We're not clever enough. We're not funny enough to say it the way Wanda does. The way she goes on this, she's heightening, and it's right according to her lens and according to her delivery style. So we love her for it, because it makes us be able to laugh at kind of like cruelty to this kid.
Okay, so when she says rescue people show up, like, ma'am, what are you doing? Hey, you're allowed to eat people when you survive a plane crash. I didn't know how long I was going to be stranded out here. Stranded, ma'am? Your flight went down 3 minutes ago. You were flying from Chicago to Nashville. You can see the effing IPOP from here. What is your problem? That looks like a bait and switch. So today, can you give me the background about bait and switch, how they work, and let's talk about how they work?
Sure. And the bait and switch is kind of like you call that. I call that the misleading game. And you're setting them up to think you're about to talk about something, and then you're very quickly make them realize, no, that whole time we're talking about something totally different. We're talking about, and then the different thing is typically funny because it's something, I punched the guy in the face because he was being an asshole, and someone, and then he said, and then I said, Father O'Leary, it serves you right or whatever. Oh, it was a priest. So it's typically like you're switching at the last second into something that there's no way that you would have ever done that to that thing, I kept wetting the bed and they finally kicked me out of Walmart, furniture section, or whatever. So, oh, I get it. I thought you were at your home doing it, but now you're at this other place, So a lot of bait and switches are that. It's
So this is similar to the bait and switch that we worked on last time with my plain PDA bit, where we talked about the couple making out in my row, and you thought they were in seat 1 and seat 2, but the switch was they were actually in seat 1 and seat 3, and I was in the middle of them.
exactly. And that it's a compare and contrast device. It's like I say in the book, I say it's often funny when you compare or contrast two things side by side, especially if you can find surprising ways in which these two worlds are exactly alike or completely different. And bait and switch is a way to take two worlds that are kind of alike but aren't, like the idea of you being in the middle or you being on the end are the same world but different, right? It's one of them is very awkward for you, and one of them is like it's none of your business now. If there's two people making out next to you, it's different than people making out over you. For her, there's a big difference between the world of I was stuck in Wanda Sykes is stuck on a plane crash on an island for a month and she's starving versus I just landed, a crash landed and I'm already eating somebody, and I can see an IHOP. So there's others, there's something else, alternatives, that are right there.
As a comic though, how do you write, like how do you tell people to write a bait and switch? Do you say like what's a reasonable person picturing when you say those words? What's the scene in their head? And then do you try to like figure out how the scene could be different but still satisfy the initial setup?
Yeah, here's how I put it in the book. I say this device sets up us up to picture an obvious scenario, but then replaces it with a total shocker. So that I guess what you'd be looking for first is the obvious place, and then the shocker. And I said, with a good bait and switch, an initial picture directly related to the setup is painted that seems to be leading to a fairly expected outcome. So again, that's the misdirection. Oh, we're thinking that she is stranded on an island for and she sort of implies that with her wording. Then, just when you think where this is going, one of the main elements becomes something completely unexpected. The person giving you the finger turns out to be a baby. The guy cursing you out is actually a priest. You're seducing someone, then we find out you're talking to your hand. So I said, and then I even give a warning. I said, this device can give some pretty cheap laughs if the switch seems forced, or if its usage at all is like unjustified. So you have to be really careful with these bait and switches because it can be a very bump kind of a joke. Like the example I use in the book is have you ever heard of Gianmarco Ceresi? This funny young comic. He does this. I call it blood splotch. But he says, my family was very squeamish about bodily functions. When I was a kid, I was in my parents' bedroom and I found on the carpet a little red splotch. Looking back, it was clearly blood. I asked my dad, what's that splotch? And he was like, oh, your mom can explain that to you when you're older. And sure enough, I got older and my mom told me that my dad used to hit her. Right. So we're thinking it's her period, but it's actually she's bleeding because she's being abused. And so it's a very dark joke. Obviously, but if he's coming from that family, he can tell that joke because he was part of it. He was part of that, if that's a real, and he's a pretty legitimate comedian. So I'm guessing that there's some real truth to that joke, he's pretty dark and you can tell he talks about some real things. He's real funny. That's a great bait and switch because that one you don't see it coming. Right. And when he does it and he delivers it, it's just the same with Wanda Sykes. You really don't see it coming. And then you're pleased by the switch because you're like, nice,
Going back to what you said earlier, Mike, about how the crowd acknowledges a good move. They're laughing, but they're also clapping because they're appreciating the craft of the stand-up, right?
If you fooled them, if you didn't give them one that was a real
they telegraphed it. You saw it coming.
Yeah, if it feels cheap or it feels like you took a shortcut or you didn't like the world you cut to isn't the same as the one you set up, so it feels like you got robbed a little bit. Or if it feels too over the top, like bait and switchy, where it's like but father, people can maybe resent that a little bit. So that's why, but we just saw two pros use that to great effect, and there were no moans. It was a real, like, this is like an applause break kind of a thing, because when it's well done, that bait and switch will really get you laughing and surprised. And that's the key to big laughs, is you just didn't see it coming. That means that they set you up so well that your brain was somewhere else, and then they got you with something that was like, oh, and then when you say I get it, it's like, I get how that still satisfies that setup. I get it. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, going through this exercise with you, Mike, it feels like I missed a bunch of the heightening devices that you can quickly identify. Like you just said, the cut forward. What's a cut forward?
It's where you create a scenario that would result from the setup. You're creating a scenario that in the future might happen based on sometime. Let me get okay, so cut forward to create a scenario that would result from the setup. And then I said, for this device, the comedian imagines a situation that existed sometime after the joke takes place. It's like with a cutback, but can be like a conversation, an activity, an idea, any scenario, so long as it somehow connects to the setup's future. So the laughs come when you pick a cut forward to situation that somehow results from the major struggle in the setup. So meaning whatever was a problem, we cut forward to the result of how the world looks like because that problem existed. So if it's my kid is mouthing off to me a lot, cut forward to that kid when she's at a job where she can't do that, or cut forward to me allowing everybody to talk back to me because I don't have the guts to even tell my kid not to. So now I'm at the hot dog stand getting berated for not knowing my toppings, and so we see that we cut forward to me as that guy. Or maybe this future scenario explains how the struggles of the setup will affect different lives later. So you can even, cut forward to like a whole different thing that results from, like, say, I trip over my neighbor's fence. Well, we can cut forward to the lawsuit that where the judge is handing down the decree. Or we can cut forward to me at midnight setting up a trap that's going to make them trip, because I'm not the only one that's going to be embarrassed in this neighborhood. You're going to look like a fool too. You trip me, I trip you, my friend. Like okay, that's a crazy one, but that's another cut forward to. And so, like the cut forward to I use in the book, I use an example of Bill Engvall. Have you ever heard Bill Engvall's bit about stupid people? It's classic, right? And he's like, I hate stupid people. They should have to wear signs. I'm stupid. That way you wouldn't have to rely on them. And then he cut forwards to an approaching a stranger for help. Excuse me, can I? Oh, never mind. I didn't see your sign. So now that's a callback, but that's also a cut forward to. He establishes a thing, which is if you're dumb or stupid, you have to wear a sign. So then he cuts forward to a moment where that future exists, and then it helps him because he's trying to get help from somebody, but he realizes, oh, sorry, I didn't see your sign. And so he shows, not tells. He didn't say, you are wearing, he kind of shows that oh, I didn't see your sign, shows that there was a moment there that he saw the thing. And now he's like, ooh. It's like when I didn't notice that you had a seeing eye dog. I'm sorry. I asked you, if you could tell me where the bathrooms are and you're blind. Or, I asked you what you think of the concert and you're deaf. Sorry, I didn't see your hearing aids. It's like kind of that kind of a thing, but I didn't see your stupid, I'm stupid sign. My bad. The cut forward to is a great heightening device to use, because especially if you're a comedian that likes to do act outs. Now, a lot of comedians are just wordsmiths. And so they like to do, they're telling jokes that do a lot of play on words and do a lot of misinterpretations of words and a lot of kind of a one-liner kind of things. Other comedians like to do those jokes, but then they like to act out those jokes so that we can see even further what that looks like. And then they usually heighten it so it's sort of an exaggerated version of what it might be. And so these cut forward tos are just a great way to do that. You can cut forward to what like a scenario that might happen because of the thing that you're talking about. And Wanda Sykes does that. She cuts forward to her crashing and having an emergency landing and supposedly needing sustenance via Billy,
Yeah, okay. So like the last episode when we worked on that plain PDA bit, you cut forward to the three of us, landing in Atlanta, or the three of us developing a relationship down the road, or you cut forward to what the pilot would be saying, or what you'd be saying at the luggage carousel.
Cut forward to the three of us like standing in line in the jetway waiting to leave, awkwardly talking about what just happened, or cut forward to that couple now needing that third person in their life after having experienced you, and so you're getting phone calls from them constantly, so cut forward to those phone calls or whatever, so you could just there's a million ways that you can cut forward to, because that struggle is, you could cut forward to all the different times when you are placed in the middle of an awkward situation. Like there could be two people are arm wrestling, but they're doing it above you. Two people are getting in a fight, but they have to do it because and you're in the middle of it. But there could be that could be a good cut forward to, like, to show this always happens to me, kind of a thing, and exaggerating the fact that you don't have enough confidence to not allow that. You know what I mean? And so therefore it keeps happening.
I like how I guess I'm noticing how these heightening devices open up a bunch of avenues for which you to develop a story. Like comics always think they need to tell a funny story. The story has to be funny, but actually, it's like the cutaways or the hypotheticals that really make the story.
Those are the flexes that I call them, the funny muscle flexes, and those are the things that surprise us because they're exaggerated, but they still make sense in how you set that up. And that's an important thing to remember is, like, when you're a comedian, half of what you say is dead serious. Half of what you say, you're trying to pretend like you're okay. This time I'm not kidding. This time I'm just being dead serious. No, I'm not. Okay, this time I'm really being dead. No, I'm not. And it's like that over and over again. And the better you get at it, the less people notice that that's what's happening. But every time, Bill Burr, or every time Kevin Hart, or Dave Chappelle begins a new story, they're not like, hey, Dad, they're always like, okay, well, my wife is the, or you know what? The other day I was walking down the street, and then it's like, oh, he must be okay. Now he's going to be serious. Okay, and then they misdirect us to think that it's going to keep being serious, and then they flip a heighten on us in one of those devices, and then that exaggerates and heightens that point that they're trying to make, or that or it surprises us in a way that we didn't expect in the way they set that thing up. And then that's what makes us laugh. And then they go back to that straight part of the story, because that's what they need in order to recalibrate and reset up a shift and a heighten, a misdirection and a heighten. So it's a weird dance. And if you don't know that that's how it goes, you might think you have to always be funny or have to always be on the thing. And that's not how it works. The true crafts people, the men and women who do comedy, it's like a dance between being dead serious and really because comedy is about struggles. We're making fun of the fact that things aren't going well a lot of times. So you're not only serious, but you're like passionate about, like, this sucks. Like Jerry Seinfeld, as goofy as he is, he's like, I don't like the fact that this is happening. I'm mad, kind of a thing. And we know he's not really, but yet same with Bill Burr, who is legitimately angry at all the things he's talking about. But the laughter comes out of relieving the tension that he's set up through that serious anger.
Okay, so we covered bait and switch, and we covered cut forward. I want to do another third one. I want to do the funny specifics, which you kind of describe as, I think, sprinkles. Like cut forward and bait and switch are more like heavier humor heightening devices, where funny specifics are like add-ons to a bit.
Yeah, the funny specifics are great. Like, okay, so I said there are words and phrases that just sound funny. I said, while you're busy looking for punchlines by heightening and yes-anding the answers to the question, how blank is it? You're going to come across words and phrases that amuse you or are just funny to say and hear. Do yourself a favor and write them down so you can plug them into your jokes. You never know when you're going to have a chance to pepper those into your material, with these funny sounding terms and descriptions. And but you do that because what it does is it sort of, like, anytime you're more specific about anything, it's going to be funnier. So, you could say there are a group of people that are in charge of making sure that people don't act out in the hallway. Well, they're the nitwit patrol. I can't even say it. They're the nitwit patrol. Well, that's funnier because it's given a funny specific and a name to those people. Anytime you do it, one of those world maps we talked about, in that world map are going to be funny specifics, and they're only funny because you put them into a place that they're not expected, because the level of detail that you're adding makes people laugh, because they think you're going to talk about a hamburger, but you say a McCheese, whatever, a quarter pounder with cheese. So it's just funnier because it's now I can picture it more vividly. So funny specifics help you picture things, more vividly, and they help paint a more vivid picture, so that when you're just telling a story, now along the way you're getting giggles just because I'm seeing that more clearly.
So it wouldn't work in Wanda's bit if she said, "Hey, I can see the grocery store from here." It's more funny when she says, "Hey, I can see the IHOP."
I could see the pancake restaurant from here. Like, isn't going to get a laugh.
Yeah.
IHOP is funny because, like, IHOPs like are exist where there's a lot of people. So she's landed obviously where it's very populated. So now it's very funny because we see specifically what she's seeing, and we can also picture what an IHOP looks like. So we can see it more clearly than a diner if she just said diner. But a diner would have probably got a laugh. But I can see the fucking IHOP from here. It gets a better laugh because now she's been very specific. She's named him Bobby. So that's a funny specific. Now she's not saying this kid, this kid, this kid, Bobby, Bobby, Bobby. Now we can picture the kid a little bit better. What else does she use in there? Air nanny. Air nanny, when she says, "Do I look like the air nanny?" Like, that's a funny specific and a recognition laugh come together because now air marshal is a thing we all recognize. It's a funny specific about flying. If you did the world of flying, a world map, air marshal would be part of it. And then now you've done a frog bank and combined the fact that she's expected to watch this kid, meaning being a nanny, and she's also there's a role on the plane for an air marshal. So she's combined those two together and made it the air nanny. And she's done it so quick, it's just a throwaway for her, but it gets a laugh because we immediately recognize, oh, I get it. She's talking about being an air marshal, but really the nanny version of that. Ha ha ha.
So it seems to say, like, as a writing technique, you should go through and look at your bit written out, and if you're seeing generic words like grocery store, replace them with Kroger. Or if you're seeing generic city, replace it with Memphis. Or I guess that seems like low-hanging fruit just to kind of go through your bits and add some funny specifics to where you see a general word.
Exactly. And that's the thing where if you watch a lot of newer comedians, they don't do that or they haven't had time to do that yet. And so their act doesn't have that level of details in it. And then you watch somebody who's more of a pro comedian, who's done their act more often, who's recorded it, who's listened, who's added those things in there, and they'll have way more funny specifics, and they'll get more laughs. And the newer comedian can't figure out why that same kind of joke isn't getting as much of a laugh in their world. And it's because, well, that girl has grabbed very funny specifics in there and has peppered their act with it. And so, but they're not really counting on them as being big laughs. They're just there. So it's like, like the frosting on the cake. And it's not even the frosting on the cake. It's the icing that says the name on it, kind of a thing. And it's not necessary to make a good cupcake, but boy, it sure makes it more, personal and more, and in the case of a joke, way more funny. So yeah, that's a great thing. That's a good suggestion, Chris. The idea of taking your act that's written out and then going through there and going, well, where is it that I'm really general? Where am I saying tennis shoe when I could say Nike? Where am I saying he had a drink and I could be saying, had a shot of espresso or whatever, just the ways that you could be more specific. And then sometimes the funny part comes when you're so specific, like in improv, there'd be people that we would do scenes with, and because you look like they were eating something, and then I'm eating a strawberry cupcake in the and the label is sticking to the bottom. Like there's a real, like the audience begins to, like, they like that, they enjoy that. They might not laugh out loud about it, but now when you're watching them in the scene, you're watching what they're doing with that cupcake, and then when you see them peel back, the container of it, and then you watch them pick off the parts of it that they already said they didn't like, and now we see them do it, and then you see them flick it, and then someone else pulls it off the wall and eats it, like that. Like that's the audience is watching all that, and they love it and enjoy it, even though that's not the main part of the scene or the story. And it's the same for stand-ups. Like when you're doing a stand-up act, there's so many opportunities to add those little details. Like you said, Wanda in there. I'm landing by an IHOP. I'm with a kid whose name is Bobby. I know his name now. I'm an air nanny. So she's grabbing as many of these funny specifics as she can and throwing it in there, so that it helps us see the picture more clearly, and it makes us laugh more.
So as I've been keeping my eye out for these heightening devices, I've even noticed them in writing. I've been reading a lot of David Sedaris, the humor writer lately, and I noticed that he uses a ton of funny specifics. So like I pulled some right here for us. This one essay he writes, he talks about his grandmother, who won't engage in nursing home activities. But he doesn't say the generic nursing home activities. He says she'd no longer square dance than join the Baptist ladies for a tour of the historic pantyhose factories of Winston-Salem. So even like Winston-Salem that even sounds funny as a funny specific.
Brilliant. And it's much more funny to picture an old person, make having to make those choices and then being asked to do those things. It's funny. Yeah, and then nursing home activities is not funny. Square dancing is funny.
Right.
Historic pantyhose factories, visiting that is funny. Of Winston-Salem. So now he's made it not just random factories, but the ones that are in this particular area. So it becomes funny because it's so particular.
In that same essay, David Sedaris talks about his grandmother didn't care if you changed the TV channel. But again, he doesn't use a generic TV channel. He says something like, she could go from the State of the Union address to a Bullwinkle cartoon without ever noticing the difference.
Right? So he's showing that this is true about her, not telling us that it's true about her. So now we can imagine what else you could get away with in front of this grandmother who doesn't notice stuff, and it's really those are very funny specifics. A Bullwinkle cartoon, I mean, it's funny. In the State of the Union address, and that's a contrast between something political and serious to something cartoony and silly, and she doesn't notice that that's even changed. It's funny. Yeah, Sedaris is great for that. And his like, what I love about his writing is there's just so many elements of truth to it. And so even though that might not have happened to him, there might not have been a Bullwinkle cartoon and a State of the Union address that was competing with her attention. But it makes his point and is truthful, because the truth of that is, like, how not distracted or how not paying attention to the details is she? Right? That she's answering that question, so much so that you could do this to her and she wouldn't notice. And then how little does she enjoy engaging with the nursing home activities? Well, she'd sooner do this than that, kind of thing. So using those funny specifics to answer that question, again, you're heightening, you're flexing, and that's why we get to laugh.
So I have one more David Sedaris bit, and I want you to tell me which heightening devices are being used here, because I find it funny, but I can't quite understand why it's funny. So there's another bit about how he has obsessive compulsive disorder when he was younger, and he did some weird things in school, like lick the light switch or lick the pencil sharpener. And so the scene is he's home in his kitchen, and his mom gets a letter from the teacher, and his mom asks, "Have you been leaving your seat to lick the light switch?" my mom asked. She placed the letter upon the table and lit a cigarette. "Once or twice," I said. "I don't know. Who's counting?" "Well, your goddamn math teacher, for one. That's her job to count. What do you think, she's not going to notice?" And later on, he talks about, like, well, maybe she was just confused with the other boy who leaves his seat to lick the pencil sharpener. "That's very likely," I said. "She's old. There are spots on her hands." "How many?" my mom asked. So why is that funny? I found that really entertaining bit, but I don't understand what techniques are at play here.
Like, a lot of what's happening in this stuff is very funny specifics. A lot of it is very we know who he is. He's sort of I believe he's sort of like a neurotic kid who's very like Seinfeld, very self-conscious of the details and what they mean emotionally. And so when we know that about him, and he establishes that very early on, like, we laugh at the fact that these things are important to him, that there's even a conversation about licking the light switch or licking or like there's another kid that does the pencil sharpener, like. And so what's funny about this to me is the way his mother's handling it. She's not screaming and she's not going crazy. She's kind of overstating the obvious. So this is what you're doing and this is how it's going. Well, maybe it's this or that. And so when you overstate the obvious, it's a really good heightening device. You're basically pretend to discover something about the setup that's actually very obvious to everyone. So you're acting as though something is like worth saying and pointing out, because no one else is seeing it and pointing it out yet, even though it's something that we all have seen and could point out because it's obvious. But when you say it and you over explain almost the obvious, it becomes funny. But like that's what overstating the obvious is. You just begin to talk about the things that are very obvious to everyone, but you say it so much and you point it out as if it's like this big revelation. Who's like that? Peggy Hill on The King of the Hill. She'll overstate the obvious all the time, and she'll say things like, It's a device that cools the room electronically, or as I like to call it, an air conditioner. And so, and it's there's an element of that where you're like, yeah, no, duh, but it's funny because she's saying it as if she's discovering it herself. And so David Sedaris seems to do a lot of that. He's very great at overstating things that are obvious, and then by adding those funny specifics in there, we laugh at the recognition of it.
So what technique is at play when he says, once or twice I said, I don't know, who's counting? Well, your goddamn math teacher for one.
That's a play on words. That's who's counting. He's saying it as if like who's paying attention to that, and she's
Like
saying literally
rhetorical.
your math teacher is counting. So I'm thinking of the word counting as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and he's like, who's paying attention? She's like,
Right.
well, the guy whose job it is to do the thing you just said is, so that's again a play on words, but it's a funny, there's a truth element to that doesn't feel cheap because it's a mother trying to discipline her son, and that's one way that she's doing it by going, you just said the thing, kind of.
I noticed also he makes that comment about she being old and having spots in her hand, and then the mother calls back the how many bit.
Right now that's a callback to counting, where the whole thing idea is that all right, we're talking about counting, so let's call that back as a concept. But again, he shows it, doesn't tell it. He doesn't say how many my mother asked, referring to the fact that we're counting. You either
Right.
get it or you don't. It's either fun or not that she's again concerned about this. The math teacher is counting. You should be counting. We should all be counting. That's the whole class is about counting. This whole story is about counting. You can count on it.
It's funny how you're like opening my lens to see the heightening devices everywhere. I feel like I'm like the guy from A Beautiful Mind that just sees conspiracy code everywhere.
Right? I think it's fantastic because it really makes you appreciate what these comedians can do. They're not only using these humor heightening devices, but they're using a combination of them, and they're doing it so quickly and so cleverly, and without like any seeming effort. It's just like boom, and all of a sudden you've got a callback, a contrast, three funny specifics, and you've got a metaphor, and it's all in one thing. And and a lot of times they're not doing that. They're not saying I'm going to take a metaphor and I'm going to mix it up with it happens, and then you go back and sort of reverse engineer it and say, oh, that's what I did. But a lot of this stuff comes very naturally to people who are organically funny, and the whole purpose of my books is to begin to show people who aren't organically funny what's happening in the brain of someone who is, so you can begin to cognitively imitate it. And then you can, like somebody who's just learning a new skill that you're not good at, just slowly work those muscles till they get better at it. And you may never, like, you might never play tennis with Serena Williams, but you can learn enough to play, back to back with your friend and then have fun with it and go, well, I play tennis. I'm a tennis player. It was the same with being funny. You can practice these heightening devices. You can practice, misdirecting people and then, satisfying that same setup with something that's exaggerated. And then you'll get better at it. And then when you get better at it, they start to occur to you naturally the way it does for us organic comics. But I tell you what, the organic comedians hate the idea that there's a book that will tell people how to do that, because it's kind of like, it's an insult to anyone who it comes naturally to think that it can be done, cognitively, with step by step effort. But it's like, well, you can do anything like that. You can learn how to play guitar, the piano, the harp. You can learn how to do a bow and arrow with that. You could
Swing a golf club.
exactly. And somebody who sucked at golf can actually get pretty good, and you can sometimes you find out you're better at it than you thought. You just didn't know how to do it, and then once you figure out how to do it, it just starts to come natural. And some of these heightening devices, you can find out you're pretty good at doing these things, and you're like, oh, I didn't know that that's what they were doing. Okay. And then you start doing them more, and then since the books have 36 humor heightening devices, it doesn't get boring. It doesn't get to be like the same thing I'm doing contrast over and over again. No, I got a whole bunch of different ways to heighten that thing.
Last David Sedaris one I brought to you today was a different essay. It was about his sister knowing a prostitute. And instead of saying something like, I was surprised my sister knew a prostitute, Sedaris will say, I would have been less shocked had a seal called my sister by first name.
And it's like, how shocked am I, that this is how shocked I am. This would have shocked me more. That's how, and it's, they're again very funny specifics, funny metaphors, funny contrast. David Sedaris has a very active imagination when he's trying to paint pictures, and he's trying to show us the weird and funny parts of his life.
Yes, that was my funny specifics I brought from David Sedaris. I wanted to show you one of my own work on the book I'm working about the Colorado Trail. The editor gave back to me some feedback, and the one section I'm talking about how like getting away from your phones and social media and being on the trail where you have no cell phone service is good for your brain. And I wrote my brain didn't feel as frazzled. But then I rewrote and made funny specifics. Instead of saying brain is frazzled, I said my brain no longer felt like a pinball machine mixed with 6 shots of espresso and itching powder.
Right. Now you've shown what feel frazzled is telling you. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's what editors are great at, is they're able to tell you those areas where you're telling. And sometimes we don't realize how often we tell. Sometimes you need to tell. Sometimes just to get through it, you need to tell some things. But for the most part, what I learned about writing is that readers really enjoy putting those things together themselves. They enjoy reading that second sentence and going, "Oh, he must be frazzled. I get it." And that's part of what's fun about reading. I didn't realize that's true. I thought if I gave it to them, it saves them time, saves us energy, and Jesus, we'll get through this book quicker. And it's like, no, that's not why I read. I read because I like to do those mental gymnastics that you set me up to do, and then you set me up to win because I get to, in my brain, picture that thing that you hinted at instead of trying to like see the thing you told me about.